Maybe I should have told you no.
I
had no idea if someone took it. Call this Topsham Select Board meeting to order, May 19, 2022, from the Donald A. Russell Meeting Room. Would you all please rise for the pledge of allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Patty, would you call the roll?
I will. David Douglas.
I am here.
Marie Brilliant. Here. Ruth Lyons. Here. Matt Nixon.
Present.
Roland Tufts. And all present, and our town manager, Derek Skrupchansky, is also at the table.
Thank you, Patty. Town manager's report.
Welcome, everyone. Collective bargaining agreements or negotiations with the town's three unions are currently underway, and hopefully we have agreements to present to you. Before the end of June. Town meeting is scheduled for 7 p.m. May 25th in the Orion Performing Arts Center at Non-Air Middle School. Residents will also be able to view town meeting via YouTube stream and Zoom, and the link is available on the town's website. So let's see if we can get practice running before that actually starts and see if it will work, but it is available. And lastly, I'd like to recognize two employees who have been tremendous assets to the town of Topsham. Rod Melanson, who has served the planning department as a natural resources planner and planning director for about 18 years now, has accepted a position in another municipal job. So we wish the best to him. And John Shattuck, who has served the town for approximately 14 years as the Economic and Community Development Director, has announced his retirement. Rod and John will be missed on behalf of the town staff. I extend thanks for their years of dedication and service to Topsham and the surrounding community. So, thank you.
Did you say we're live streaming town meeting?
It'll be streamed in,
To watch, not for input, not for comment.
We should probably talk about that, I would think, at some point.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems as though it helps keep people away. Any other questions of the manager? Board committee reports and update. Conservation Commission has an update. Victor Langelo.
Victor Langelo, 3 Brookside Drive, Chair of the Conservation Commission. You may remember that in February of this year, I presented an update from the Conservation Commission and talked about, among other things, looking to contribute some money to the conservation of the highway farm parcel along Catman's River. And the Conservation Commission went back and looked at what accounts we have and money we had available, and really the only funds that were, I would say, free and clear at that point in time was money in this open space in lieu fee account, we're calling it. It's money that when developments are approved, they're required to set aside additional space for the increased recreational needs of the town. But also, if they don't really have anything that the town's accepting for additional park or whatever, they pay a fee in lieu. And so that's been collecting in this account for a number of years. Until anyway, so we have enough money in there to contribute, a sizable portion to this property. And we also, looked at the value of the property, for the town and stuff like that. And it's very nice. We did a site walk just this month, earlier this month. And it's a very nice, it's a very nice spot on the Catman's River. It's going to be something that I think the town will really value. So we're recommending that the town spend $20,000 out of that account toward up to $20,000 in that account towards the purchase of this property. BTLT will be the owner. But, you know, it's in the town, so we figure it's worth it. And what was I going to say that? I forgot what that train of thought was. So anyway, at this point, and also the recreation, we don't really have an official policy on this, but the one we were developing recommended that we consult with the recreation department because this is for increased recreational needs of the town. So Pam has agreed that this is an appropriate use for these funds. It's the kind of thing that she thought the funds were actually should be used for. So so anyway, the follow-up action at this point is for the select board to consider appropriating the money at a future meeting. That's at some point. The project or the purchase has to be is slated for June 30th. So we probably should get the money to BTLT before then, so they can close on the deal. And if they are widely successful at collecting funds on their own, we would contribute less than the 20,000 or whatever it needs to, you know, to fill that remaining gap. So, and then, should I stop there or should I go on to the next thing? Ask questions.
I've got questions, but it might be for Angela more specifically.
Okay, well, that's why Angela's here.
Hi, I'm Angela Twitchell with the Brunswick Topsham Land Trust. I'm also a resident of Topsham. I live here on Main Street. And I came here tonight to answer any questions you might have on the Hideaway Farm Conservation Project. But before you ask, I just wanted to highlight what an important partner the town of Topsham has been in the conservation efforts around the Catance River over the last few decades. The Land Trust, in partnership with the town, has conserved approximately 42,000 feet of frontage on the river and about 1,000 acres of habitat. We've created some of the most well-used trail systems in the town that are well-used at the Catance River Nature Preserve, Bradley Pond Farm, the Catance River Trail, as well as partnered with the town to create Head of Tide Park, which I think, I know many of you are really proud of the town's partnership with the Land Trust on that. So this is another parcel in that Catance River corridor effort that we've partnered with the town on over the years. And we would be grateful for a contribution from the town from the fund set aside for conservation and recreation. And I know you had some information in your packet, but I'm really happy to answer questions if you have.
Cool. Parking. Is there going to be a lot available there for people to use? So they can.
Yes, the plan is, if you look on the map, the Land Trust acquired a couple of years ago, we conserved the Robert Williams Preserve, which is right at the end of Katy Lane. And then this property, the 18-acre Hideaway Farm property, abuts that going downriver. So the parking will actually be on the Robert Williams Preserve, but the trail will connect those two properties.
Cool. Right. I got more, but if you want to go ahead.
No, it was.
So you guys are going to basically take over the maintenance once you purchase the property, correct? So like clean up trash, that's what.
Exactly right. Yep, we will be owning the property outright. It's not an easement. We'll be owning it. So we will be responsible for building the trails, maintaining the trails. I will say we're a small nonprofit and a lot of the stewardship work gets done by volunteers. Many of those volunteers are Topsham residents, and it's really great because they're out there on the ground. They're there all the time and they really know the property. So.
Last question, dogs, allowable?
Once we acquire a property, we do the management plan. So I don't know for sure, but typically we will allow dogs on our properties unless there's a really sensitive habitat. We do require that they're on leash, but we do allow dogs on almost all of our properties.
What about Horses.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, Hideaway Farm is a place that Mr. Stuckey has had horses for many years. He does not have them now. So we haven't done the management plan. I don't know that there would be a demand for that, but the trails are pretty wide and flat and have been used for horse and carriage rides. So I hear that question and we'll consider it when we do the management plan, if we hear a demand from the public for that use.
Victor, I got two. Well, one for you, probably one for me. So just from a 30,000 foot view, the monies that you're talking about, this seems like an appropriate action for it. Though, do we have, and how close, if we don't, are some guardrails to how we should use that money in the future?
Well, that's, when we were looking at, the Conservation Commission last year reviewed the various fund, various accounts that are set up for conservation. And in that review, many of them, all but this fund, have ordinance language that determines how they should be spent, for what purposes, et cetera. This didn't have any ordinance language related to that. The ordinance itself says why it's being collected, not how it should be used necessarily. So yes, that's the point of my next item, which was we developed a policy. It's relatively short. It's we hope fairly simple to execute, but yet involves the appropriate people in deciding conservation and recreation, in deciding whether these kinds of funds, and also the policy restricts it to capital expenditure. So it's not, we're not buying baseball bats and stuff like that. We're actually buying land or something that's of permanent value, because these are one-time kinds of funds that we're not going to. It's not going to be replenished unless we have more developments. So we're not going to try to spend it on something that's going to be a recurring fund. So those are the guardrails that I foresee, but at this point, there's none in code that at least that I could find.
Right. So where have you guys been? Because management been involved is
The answer is no. Victor, however, did present the draft policy back in February. We were waiting. It was just never put forth to be an agenda item.
right.
We were thinking there's going to be some sort of look at it and from this isn't pointing the fingers, but that come from the conservation committee through staff to bring forward as an agenda. And it just got put to the side basically because nothing really came out. It's pretty much how it played out. When Victor approached us, I think not too long before the meetings previous to this one, he had mentioned that this would be coming forward. The intent tonight was to update you on where this project is, since we hadn't heard since February, and hopefully bring this forward for June 2nd agenda.
So I would just say, in a general setting, once we get to the portion where we're going to start spending any monies and there's negotiations between entities, the town manager has to be involved. This isn't volunteer committee. It's the committees to say, hey, we want to, but everything there forward then needs to take place with the administration, who then will determine to bring it to us. So I would say immediately, if we're going to get on June or whatever it is, we got to have you on board looking at and getting it ready for us.
So we'd like to bring this forward June 2nd. That gives us time to go through the process of getting a warrant. Assistant Town Manager Waltz will be in my place on June 2nd. So that he'll come back. Conservation Commission with a request.
Right.
For your approval for expenditure.
I just want to make sure that we have to go through another.
We did attempt to do that, but I think somewhere along the channels, the communication failed. I budget season came and unfortunately, hopefully went.
Not yet.
And
Next
so,
week.
just somehow or another, the communication change just didn't quite get to.
Like, it's just
Yeah.
$20,000-$30,000 is, we really need eyes on,
Yeah,
you know.
sure.
Those are my questions, so. Continue. Yes, sorry, thank you, Angela.
We may have already covered this. But the rest of my, the rest of my update was really that we would like to propose that this policy for expending these in lieu fee funds be considered by the board and hopefully adopted as a town policy. I don't know that. And I'm open to other suggestions, either in ordinance language or, whatever seems appropriate, but we're just thinking, let's start simple and see whether, the board has to approve any expenditures anyway. So, I mean, it seems like that's the appropriate place to go. And so we're just looking, we'd be open to a workshop and discussing, what kinds of constraints should be on this, whether what we come up with is right or wrong. Off the mark. So, anyway, that's I guess we'd ask. It doesn't, sometime in the future, sometime in the near future, maybe, we should get this going. We do have, just to give you a little more background, we do have funds coming in. We didn't have them, they weren't committed early enough for this project, but with the solar developments continue to go forward, we will have substantial money for conservation purposes that has to be used for nothing but purchasing, acquiring or the cost, the fees towards acquiring conservation land or easements. So those would probably be the first place we would pick money from for this kind of project. Just we didn't have any committed. We may anyway. So, but we probably will. My guess is that we probably will in the future. And that is determined by town ordinance and also requires going to town meeting. So, according to the ordinance. Any questions?
I'm just trying to think with the policy, does it need what's everyone's thought? Does it need to, do we need to draft something that ends up, if all these other accountants are ordinance driven, should we go in that way? Do we want to work? What's everyone thinking? Just so Victor knows, because the quicker we can move, the better we can make that.
And we would want to, if there's, significant changes you're recommending, I would want to bring it back to the commission. I'm not the decider here. So,
No, I think it's more, how do we, I mean, I don't think what you have here is wrong, in my personal opinion. But everything we do is about the future, making sure it may not be us sitting here, right? Maybe not you here,
right.
And how is it handled? So that's kind of what we got thoughts? Should we workshop and then decide whether it would become, once we go for a policy?
I think we just need to discuss that and lay it out to have a workshop.
Is Rod still, I mean, has he given any feedback?
No, and I recall that particular update with that policy, and there wasn't any feedback at that meeting. I think everybody was pretty much in agreement of what was presented. There was no issues to be brought up. I thought it was a good, well-written policy. So it'd be up to the board of selectmen to just approve the policy and move forward.
Mm-hmm. All right, so maybe do people want it on the next agenda? Do we want a workshop?
It's just put on the agenda.
Okay, and then, so let's put that before the hideaway farm. Let's have a policy in place before we do the farm,
By the farm.
until we buy the farm. But I do think we have to think about in the future, whether it's done ordinance wise or not, just because all the others are. It's odd this one isn't, and I think other than, I think it's just to line up with the others. It just seems to be the thing to do in the future. for now, we can go with it as a policy, but for next year's town meeting, maybe we ought to have it ready to go.
Part of that distinction is that the other funds, like the SAMP program, the PTO program, the funds are collected for a very specific purpose.
Okay.
And this is a little broader, and so it's a little bit more flexible about how the money gets spent. So, so anyway, that's.
So maybe we want to stay right where we're at.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's the question. Because it's hard to write ordinance languages that get, you know, that hem things in, don't hem things in too much, but then yet allow some flexibility. So, anyway, that's consideration.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is John coming on?
John.
Public comment? Correspondence. I don't remember the day we got that letter. We all got a correspondence, I believe, from a Natalie Staples. Dear Brunswick and Topsham Town Councils, we have recently noticed a big problem in the Brunswick Topsham area. That problem is the Frank J. Woods, and here are reasons why. First, it is destroying our ecosystem. The rust is falling off the bridge and the fish are eating it and killing them. The new bridge will have 2 walkways so that bikers do not have to bike on the roads. Also, many big trucks can't go on the old bridge. Even school buses can go on it. Even school buses can't go on it. Thank you for taking the time to read this letter. Thank you, the mini committee. And it is signed, AKA Natalie Staples. And another person, so that's all I've got with it, but that was what was said. Did we get any others? Anyone recall? Consent calendar approval of the minutes of the regular select board meeting, May 5, 2022. Seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Screaming right along. 2233, consideration any appropriate action on a consent agreement to resolve a possible subdivision issue regarding property of Carol A. Davis, 723 Headings Road.
What we'll do, we'll start with Attorney Jenny Birch, who represents Ms. Davis, and she'll explain the issue, and I'll bring up the slides that you can talk about.
I'm Carol Davis's attorney. My name is Jenny Birch, and Carol has an inadvertent subdivision matter that was brought up by the attorney for her buyer. She has her property currently under contract. I made some sketches to show Mark and Rose and what happened. Originally, the land that Carol owns at 723 Cathan's Road was part of a larger parcel that was owned by Catherine Brilliant and Kimberly Greenleaf, and their neighbor is George Thompson. And I sketched what Catherine and Kimberly owned in blue and what George owned in orange. And it's significant that George's driveway crosses the blue lot over at the corner. And I showed that with an arrow. Then in 2019, Catherine and Kimberly sold Carol the farmhouse on the land and some acreage, and I sketched that in purple. So now we have lot 1, lot 2, and we still have George, the neighbor, with his driveway crossing now the purple lot. And then in 2021, last year, Catherine and Kimberly sold some more acreage to George, so his orange lot expanded, and some more acreage to Carol. So the purple lot expanded, and they sold the rest of the blue lot to someone else. So we still have lots 1, 2, and George the neighbor, and George's driveway is still crossing the purple lot. Then this past January, George and Carol had been having some discussions about misconceptions of who and what, and who should be landscaping what, and who should be mowing what, and who should be planting where. And they decided to resolve that by simply conveying some more land to George so that his driveway would no longer be crossing a part of the blue lot. So they adjusted their boundary again. And we still have lot 1, lot 2, and George's lot. And the surveyor thought this was fine, and I thought this was fine too, because Maine's subdivision laws all have an exception for a conveyance to an abutter. That's not counted as a lot for the purposes of subdivision. Neither one of us caught the fact that when land is conveyed to an abutter, it's supposed to stay with the rest of the abutter's land for a period of 5 years before going someplace else. So we have an inadvertent technical subdivision violation here that the buyer's attorney pointed out. So we don't have any additional lots. We have a boundary adjustment. If Carol had sold George's driveway area to George before lots 2 and George's lot got bigger, we wouldn't have this problem. But we do. So we're here asking if the town could agree to certain terms to cure this violation. And we detailed that on the consent agreement. And worked through this with input from Mark and the town attorney.
So what we did is we talked to Tom Lister and Rod Melanson. Neither has any issues with this because this fits within the spirit of the subdivision law. In essence, it was just a changing of a boundary. It's not a creation of like a fourth lot or something. And then we ran it by the town attorney, Phil Saucier. He looked at the consent agreement. He had no issues with it. He's satisfied. And the only other piece we'd like to get is just to offset the town's costs of the attorney review. We're asking for a $200 fee paid to the town. But with that said, we're happy to entertain any questions.
Do you have in writing from the attorney saying this is okay?
I have an email, yes.
Okay.
Is the buyer's attorney, they're good with this when we do it?
Yes.
This will clear everything. Anyone else have questions?
Quick one. And clearly if our attorney has no issue with this, then this can be overlooked, but I'm just looking at bullet 1 under the agreement section of the consent agreement. It says Topsham shall take no enforcement action. Relinquish its right to prosecute Davis or her successors in interest of the real property located at 723 Canis Road for violation. Town of Topsham land use ordinance regarding subdivision. It doesn't say this subdivision. It says just subdivision in general, which references our ordinance currently. So that means if there's a future subdivision, can they point back to this and say, well, you said we can never prosecute, you can never prosecute us?
I don't think so, because this agreement describes this problem.
Okay.
So it could be a stretch to say that, I don't know, if they went through and cut it into 3 pieces, and 8 years from now,
Yeah,
this would cover that.
fair enough. Cool.
But in 8 years, all rules are off after 5, right?
Right, although you couldn't do 3 pieces in
Oh,
a 5-year period.
yeah. I have no questions. I will make a motion that we sign the consent agreement as presented to us. That's all my motion.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor? Someone has that we can do that.
And if I can ask you all one question, do you sign that as you're willing it as your free acting deed so that we can take your acknowledgement?
I do.
And then select board member Nixon, your concern also looks like it's addressed in paragraph 2, because it says subsequent to January 22nd, 2027, all future divisions must be in accordance with then current town of Topsham.
Perfect. We're good.
Okay.
So I do.
You just said I do at a selectmen's meeting, not even. Thank you.
Sorry for that, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. driveway spend I've ever been a part of. Item 2234, consideration and appropriate action on adoption of the Saginaw County Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021 update. Chief.
So this comes up every 5 years. I wasn't part of the last one. About a year and a half ago, town managers, myself, Public Works Director, all met with the county. We go over recent hazards, storms, we go over mitigation, tree removal, culverts, projects that we completed, projects that are ongoing, projects that we plan for the future. And we pretty much just give an update on what we're doing for hazard mitigation in the town. If there's any big developments that add new hazards, new chemicals, things like that, we discuss that and make sure we all have our policies in place. So this is just an update. It's been approved by FEMA. So the last step in approval for county is to get all of the participating municipalities to sign off on it.
Do you have any questions? That document always in that same spot that we're given, so it's always there.
Should be, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I saw it. I saw you. I saw you.
I don't put a lot of stock in people's blood match for one, but like, it is what it is, right? It's the best available information. I think in one of their maps, they had my entire neighborhood and most of Pleasant Point completely inundated in a Category 3 hurricane.
I saw that.
And then in the priority section where we talk about mitigated plans and priorities, I think it's in it's in the next section. It addresses Pleasant Point as being a major priority, but it says nothing about Forsyth Road. So I was just kind of curious what was going on there.
We're gonna go around. Yeah, that's noted. I think they focused mostly on Pleasant Point, because that seems to be the highest, one of the many. Yeah.
So you guys, you actually maintain that list to contact people in the event of a hurricane?
County has it all.
County?
Yeah. Yeah, we go through EMA for most of that stuff. So
That's all I got. Just to point that out. Neglected neighborhood.
noted. 5 years from now, we should fix it.
Beautiful people on the water, Matt. Should have been one. So, no other questions. I will make a motion that we adopt the Saginaw County Hazard Mitigation Plan 2021. update.
Second.
Motion Dan, seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. More signatures, folks. Change that 5 years. Everyone can follow along as I keep going. 2235, consideration and appropriate action to allow the police chief to apply on behalf of the police department for a Maine law enforcement accreditation grant. The next chief, come on up.
Evening, Mark Hagan, Police, and the Maine Municipal Association intends to provide a one-time award in August to 10 law enforcement agencies in the state. Those accepted agencies will receive an award of up to $5,000 to be used towards getting accredited. And we would like to be able to apply for that money. Now, what will happen is the $5,000 is to be used towards a contract with an outside state-approved entity to go forward with the process to actually get accredited. The outside entity charges right now over 2 years, $7,500. So we could, so they'll charge it over 2 years, so it'd be $3,750. We could put $2,500 towards that. We'd have to come up with the rest. And then we would have 24 months to receive our accreditation. You know, the positives of and the primary goals of getting accredited are to improve the delivery of law enforcement services to the public. And also it reduces risk and liability to not only the officers and the agency, but the whole town as well. In addition, I should note that certified agencies, accredited agencies also get a 15% credit on law enforcement liability insurance through the state of Maine. So We would like to apply for the grant. I'll be right up front with you all. I originally was not going to try to get the accreditation process started until next year so that I could budget for this. But the state came out with this a short while ago. And it seemed like the appropriate time. I don't know if this money will be available next year. So even though we didn't necessarily budget for it, I'll find it. And if we receive it, it's a chance for the town to pay $5,000 less.
So Chief, is this outside agency working with you to correct general orders that need to be? Is that how it works? Or are they just a review process?
Yeah, they will work with us, but basically they will tell us, yeah, you need to fix this, you need to fix this, this is what you need to do, and have us start that process. Most of accreditation, to be honest with you, is going through our general orders, making sure they're in line with what's accepted by, the bigger, approved law enforcement entities and saying, these are the best practices in the United States or in this particular, realm, that would be the state of Maine. And it's just making sure that we have our general orders up to speed and that we have the appropriate training. So,
Was this the regulation that our audit?
Was it what?
Evaluation.
Yeah.
well, they did look at all the general orders to make sure that they were up to date, but they were not looking from the aspect of making sure that they were. Yeah.
I got no issue. No brand me.
Yeah. Any questions? No? Make a motion that we allow the police chief to apply on behalf of the police department for Maine law enforcement accreditation grant.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. 2236, consideration any appropriate action to allow police chief to apply on behalf of the police department for the Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant.
So this is a grant, it's a long-standing grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And basically what it does is it reimburses agencies, law enforcement entities, up to 50% of the cost of bullet-resistant vests. And so the last time we applied for this grant was in 2020. At that time, we received $2,400. We're down to, we have $1,089 left in the grant, which will expire at the end of August. Our issue right now is that we're 4 officers short. We also have 4 officers that could retire at any point. So I would like to apply for at least $4,500, which would cover the costs of over nine vests. We've got enough money remaining to get reimbursed for 2 vests. We're 4 down right now. We lost 3 officers this spring. 2 got out of law enforcement altogether. 1's going to another agency. So we suddenly find ourselves in a need to buy more vests, unfortunately. We've got one of the people that left this spring was brand new, so we can do the Cinderella thing and look at our applicants and see if the vest fits any of them. We can pick them. But other than that, we're going to have to fit vests for officers.
Any questions?
Can you model the?
I'd rather not, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we allow the police chief to apply on behalf of the police department for the Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant. Motion and seconded by your choice.
I heard this.
There you go. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. 2237, consideration any appropriate action on the Historic District Commission, Topsham Community Center committees. We had interviews this evening. We interviewed Ann Callahan, the Community Center Committee, and Peter Davison for the Historic District Commission. Any comments, questions? Both great people. Once again, make a motion that we appoint both of them to the respective committee and commissions.
Second.
On you, buddy. It's all you. Motion and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Matt, take us down. Second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Goes up.